So we have reached the time and we are going live to Facebook as well. And we are still waiting for people to join, but as the schedule is very tight, I need to start at 7 sharp. So good evening, everyone, and warmly welcome to this webinar, Sense Making in Polarizing Times. What is deep diversity in healthy and just transitioning? I'm Arci Pasanen, and I will be your host tonight together with my dear friend, David Bennett. And we are both co-chairs of Transition Network Sweden. And we have also with us the lovely Abdul Othman from ECOLISE, who is our tech host tonight. So if you have any technical questions, please do write to him in the chat. And before I give way to our first contributor tonight, I would like to say some opening words. We are living in times that are greatly demanding and greatly painful. While we are living through the 6th mass extinction, we witness and experience and sometimes are even part of creating injustices and pain to our fellow human and non-human beings. We know that the systems we're working to transform are destroying the living whole. And these times ask everything from us. And I know that many of us here tonight devote time, energy, and all of ourselves to bring forth a more just, a more healthy and beautiful world. The transition movement is born out of the fierce belief in the collective beauty we humans are capable of when we come together to reimagine and rebuild our world. It is a great task, and to know where to go, it is always useful to ask, where are we now? How does the map look like? What acts of history has taken us here, both personal, but also in the history of us humans? And what can be learned from them? In Sweden, we are celebrating the 100-year anniversary of equal rights to vote this year. Next year marks the 100 years since the foundation of the State Institute for Racial Biology in Uppsala. Parallel to great steps for equality, deeply horrible ideas have been there. And there is a great deal of violence in the story that has led us to where we are today. But alongside it are the pathways where the strengths, the visions, the stories, and the love for the world carried by our ancestors still grow and bloom. Those who devoted their time, their energy, and themselves for a brighter future for us. And today, we are the ancestors and the caretakers for the future to come. It is by coming together, we are making sense in polarizing times and honoring the weight that our ancestors carried. And it is through giving space to the deep diversity of thoughts, ideas, cultures, and experiences, we can start healing the wounds of today that are reflections of the injuries of the past. For me personally, this event tonight is really important. Within the transition movement Sweden, there has been heated discussions regarding these important topics on diversity and inclusion. And not only in Sweden, but these discussions are alive in many places. And unfortunately, they tend to become divisive in a time when we need most of all to come together. And I really want to acknowledge that it can be painful and sensitive when we speak of diversity and inclusion. So it is with great care and love we have worked for this event. And we believe that when we invite beauty, care, and warmth to these conversations, we are helping to create not only safe spaces, but brave spaces. Spaces where we find strength to be the brave leaders for the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. I'm very proud for the lineup we have tonight, as I firmly believe that they who will speak can bring a multi-layered and complex approach, just as we need in the sense-making work. So with that said, I give you David Bennett.
Thank you, Arci. Yes, it's lovely to see so many people here tonight, so many names that I recognize and some that I don't, of course. Yes, it's with great care that we put this program together, and it's with great care and love for the movement which we work for, we work with, we work through, that seeks to diffuse these polarizing, some of these polarizing issues that are dividing us. And can we instead look at polarizing as, in perhaps its scientific sense, where things that are different attract each other in some way? Everything's an exploration. We don't have the answers. We are going together in these times, trying to find our way forward. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is called Robert Wanalo. And I met Robert Wanalo in a warm data training and was soon in awe of his sensitivity and way with words. Warm data may be unfamiliar to many of you, but it's about the relations between participants in living learning systems. Robert is based in Nairobi, Kenya, and has recently joined the staff of the Post-Growth Institute as the Director of Movement Building. His noticing is sublime, and we are honored to have him with us tonight. Robert will be giving us a little introduction to, well, a story to get us going on this journey together tonight. And he'll be coming back at several other points during the evening to reflect and to offer us new perspectives while we're engaging in this exploration. So over to you, Robert.
Had to take a little bit of a breath there. Hello, everybody. I believe good evening to most, but it might be morning as well to many. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it has been a little bit of a interesting experience thinking about what to say this evening. And I guess what became present for me was something to do with comedy. And there's this particular gentleman called Dion Cole, who is an African-American comedian. And he has this very interesting thing that he does on stage. He comes with a notebook and a pen, and he just says jokes. And, you know, like whatever is funny, he'll like, you know, make a little tick there. And whatever's not, he'll make like an X. And it's kind of like something he's become known for as a thing he adopts for his bit every time that he does. And what I appreciate about him, and of course what the internet has enabled, is that it enables us to see way before the comedy special, way before the comedy tour, you know, which many people get to see, how those little nightclub bits where, you know, you're performing to 7, 12, 20 people and you're just trying out your jokes, and the good ones get to go on, and the not so good ones, you know, they become the jury and they decide like what's good and what's not. And it's very easy to deem these comedians to be perfectionists when you look at, you know, the final material. But what we get to see, or what I've seen like through him and through just those little tiny less popular YouTube videos, is that the people who listen are part of the process of deciding what is humorous and what is not. And so the comedian is not so much just a funny person, but they're almost like researchers to some extent. And what they are is that they're particularly keen and sensitive to what's humorous. And so their role in the social ecology, if you might think of it that way, is that their job is to find out, what is hilarious from the people and to, give it back to them in the form of a nice show. So I guess, yeah, it's been interesting to think of a comedian as a researcher in some various ways. And I'm also thinking that reminded me of a conversation I had with a friend of mine who was very interested in living systems and soil. And for her, it became very interesting, the idea of slime, snot, and glue in the soil, the things that are produced by the microbiome. And they're produced by the microbes in the soil, or maybe I have not the right word for it there, but just the life in the soil produces all of this gooey stuff. And the gooey stuff provides a holding space for the organisms that produce this material. And so there's a way in which it became interesting to see how there's something that produces something, and this other thing becomes the thing that provides a supportive space for it. And so to think about this humor not so much as something that's coming from the comedian, but just something that is, in order for there to be hilariousness or funniness in the performance stage, it's something that is generated in between the comedian and the audience. And so it's something that is found together, So I guess that's what's been a little bit of an interesting thought for me of late. And I saw that Arci posted a poem that I had written a couple of weeks ago in the Facebook invite, and it was interesting. It was a week whereby I had just been on at least maybe 6 hours of conversation every day, and I was feeling like a rugby ball was inside my head, and I could not, navigate upstairs. So I needed a quiet Saturday, and we have a whole ocean of crickets outside our house. So that's my 6 p.m. refuge, the nice hot cup of masala tea. And that's what I will typically be found doing in the evenings. And so I was sitting outside there, and all of a sudden, just being very aware, of what's happened, just what my surroundings looked like on that evening. And all of a sudden the words came, and they just began to form. And I went inside, I wrote some of them, and then I began to continue to write. But then now it became clear that, okay, so I'm writing here, but this is information that's coming from another place. So it didn't feel very good. So I just went back outside and I sat, and that the guidance came from there again. And then I came back in, and then the remainder just came, and it just felt, good. And in that moment, on the one hand, there was the joyous experience of feeling like, I created this, or I wrote this, or, this or that. And but on the other hand, I began to think, but wasn't I an observer in this? If there's anything that is to be ascribed, the reverence of, anything beautiful here, it was that evening with the lovely crickets and the shades of color at night, how the moon looked like, and how things smelt like, and even the conversations that seemed tiring enough to make me feel strenuous, they were they were a part of that process. And so there was, on the one hand, to think of the creator in this small, tiny ring. But then when you begin to think, oh, but what's outside here, you begin to see so many other things. And as the territory expands, you begin to see the place for so many other different things that really informed this creative process. And then what became much more interesting than feeling like the writer of that poem was like, wow. So it was just, just being in that space of like just being aware of what was in my surroundings and seeing what came from my friends, what came from the crickets, what came from the smell of the air that evening, and all of those interesting things. And considering that poem to be an expression of that, so that was what I was feeling like. And there's this popular, well, not so popular, I don't know, Gregory Bateson's phrase, which I seem to paraphrase, and I don't know if I, chose very nice words, but I'll just go ahead and read it. And so it's what is the pattern that connects the comedian to the microbe, the poet to the landscape, and me to you? And what that phrase, even the original one, seems to be calling attention to is that there's just, a lot of difference and diversity in nature, in the ecology. And it seems like the pattern that connects is something that you observe, and the observation becomes a starting point for how a relationship forms, and the relationship becomes a magic of its own when you find it. So I guess that's what's present for me. And I hope I didn't go extra overboard, Arci. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. And thank you for being here with us tonight. And we will straightly jump into the next keynote contributor, who is no one less than Anim, who is a transitioner and active in Transition Brixton in the UK. And he's also the diversity and equity advisor to Transition Bounce Forward. And he has made a PhD thesis called Green, but mostly white. Why? And in there, he takes a deeper look into why the environmental movements in multicultural societies still lack ethnical diversity. And we are super happy that Nick is with us tonight. He's a greatly warm person with a heart that bounces forward from what if to what is that more beautiful world. Very much welcome, Nick.
Thank you so much, Arci, and thank you, David, as well for the welcome. It's lovely to have met you before and to meet you again tonight, this evening. And Robert, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction to the session. Really, it was so warm, and you have such a calming voice, I have to say. Really, I think whenever the world is in turmoil, we need to broadcast your voice on a loudspeaker, on a global loudspeaker of some sort. Anyway, thank you everyone for joining us as well. Really appreciate it. And before I start, I generally tend to do this. Are we okay? Yeah. Okay. Before I start, I generally like to do this, and that is just for us to observe a moment of silence, just to pay homage and respect to a lot of activists who have sacrificed their lives in stewardship of the earth. I think there were 212 last year, and there are many more now. And of course, right now we have so much turmoil around the world. So I'd just like us to spend a brief moment just to reflect on that. Okay. Thank you all so much for that. Really appreciate it. Now, David, can I share my screen?
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. Right, if there's any problem, just David, raise your hand and I'll stop and so on. Okay, so I decided to, having spoken to David and Arci, I decided to call this, you know, or to entitle this sort of, it's the conclusion of my thesis on why environmentalism is so right, and this conclusion is titled Race Matters and Why Matters of Race Matter in Environmental Matters. And I hope it will become apparent why it's called that. Of course, on the right there, you have a picture of the transition, a picture from a transition conference. I think that was 2011. And I think the picture speaks 1,000 words, you know, it speaks volumes. And what I was asking and what I asked at the beginning of my thesis was why environmental movements so very white. I joined the transition movement in 2012, or Transition Town Brixton in 2012. And I joined because it was recommended to me by my mentor and professor, Robert Beale, who said, look, there's a movement doing some really exciting things, and they have a different approach to activism. And their approach is a positive vision and also a solutionist approach. And I thought, this sounds really good. You know, yes, I've done some activism in the past, you know, on the streets, protesting against various issues. But this approach just sounded intriguing. So I thought I'd find out, and I joined Transition Town Brixton in that respect. So here are the talking points, just very briefly, how I intend to present. I'll give a brief description or brief run through of my research. Of course, I can't give a full run through in 15 minutes of research that has taken me 5-6 years to conduct. And then I look at the problem of us versus them. And then we go into a brief discussion on deep diversity as a potential entry point for overcoming us versus them issues. And then now for some thoughts and conclusion, which hopefully will inspire some questions from attendees from the audience. Okay, so just to highlight, the transition movement is a movement that describes itself. Okay. Oh, before I say that as well, sorry, before I get into that, just to say that I am, of course, speaking on behalf of myself and not even Transition Town Brixton, but really on behalf of myself and my experiences with Transition Brixton. And due to the nature of the topic that I'm covering here, race matters and why matters of race matter and environmental matters, some of the things I say may challenge you a bit, may make you feel a bit uncomfortable, may unhouse you, unseat you, you know, all those good things that really give us food for thought and spur us onto change. Yeah. So the transition movement describes itself as a movement of communities coming together to reimagine and rebuild our world. I've been writing something very recently and yet to be published, and I'll pass it on to David and Arci once it is published. Looking at that statement and looking at it from a critical point of view, because of course the transition movement has been described very much as not being radical enough to face the problems that we have in society at the moment. And what are those problems? Okay, I put those problems almost in two categories, but really it's one. I'll explain. On the one hand, we have the climate and ecological emergency that is upon us. And then on the other hand, we have what I call a problem of belonging and othering in society. And belonging and othering really relates to the first problem of the climate and ecological emergency in many ways. When I give talks, I normally describe the issue of belonging and othering in the 21st century as the biggest problem facing humanity at the moment, because when we think about it, we can think about othering in three particular ways. Othering from ourselves. So we've advanced so much that we've advanced away from ourselves in many respects. We don't give ourselves enough love, care, and attention. And then there's othering between groups, between different groups of people based on it might be race, religion, and so on. Of course, we have the issue in Palestine right now, which is really showing massive othering. A manifestation of massive othering. And then, of course, the third degree of othering that I often talk about is othering from nature. And so these are the three sort of things that I think are the biggest problems, or frame the biggest problems for humanity at the moment. Marx adds a fourth category, which is othering in terms of we're all doing a lot of jobs that we don't really want to do. We should be doing jobs that we kind of like, appreciate, and so on. So the starting point for this talk really is the invitation from David and Arci. When I saw the description, there is a need to come together and address topics of concern with conversations that aim to generate trust, understanding, collective action, and collective action for the greater good. Now, one of the things that drew me to the transition movement, apart from my mentor and professor sort of recommending the movement to me, was this dictum, this saying that if we wait for governments, it will be too little too late. If we act as individuals, it will be too little. But if we act as communities, it might just be enough just in time. I thought, how exciting is that? If we can really act as communities and solve the problems within our communities and so on. Yes, we don't particularly need government for a lot of the things. We can solve a lot of the problems we have within our communities. What could go wrong with that? Nothing, really. I mean, if you think about it in a utopian sense. But then the question, of course, that arises is, we who? Who do we mean by the we? When we talk about, if we act as communities, and we're always talking about we, but we never really question the we. And oftentimes the we is reflective of ourselves and our end group, so to speak. So I embarked on my research to find out, to see why environmental movements were so wide, mainly because when I joined the Transition Brixton, and then I started going to lots of different meetings. I go to the meetings, and oftentimes I'd be the only person like myself in terms of color, race, in those meetings. And I used to ask myself, why? What's going on? After about a year of going to several meetings, not just with Transition, but with other groups as well, I started to feel a bit like an endangered species. I thought, oh, what's going on? Why? I need to try and understand this. And that is actually before I started my research. So then I went on to my research. And as David said before, Arci said before, the title of my research was Green, but mostly white. Why? I just really wanted to understand what was going on, what is going on. And to help me in that investigation, I had 4 questions. I looked at in what ways does social identity intersect with collective action in global environmental movements such as the transition movements. By global, of course, I'm talking about environmental movements that have a focus on place, on a particular place, but always keeping an eye on the global. So the place is intimately connected to the global, always. The second question I asked was, why does inclusion and diversity matter for the transition movements? And that might seem a bit of a peculiar question, really, because coming from a certain point of view, I thought, well, we should all be doing this together. We should all be part of this movement. But then there's this deficit of diversity, what I often call the diversity deficiency syndrome, not just with the transition movement, but also with all environmental movements that I've studied. And I park to one side the environmental justice movement, which we can talk about a bit later, which focused on environmental racism as its genesis for its genesis. The third question I asked was, how can Transition Town Brixton better engage with racially marginalized groups in Brixton to help build solidarity across differences? Now, that question is because Brixton in London, if you know London at all, Brixton is an inner city district of London, and it is very multicultural. It's a buzzing place. It's got so many wonderful people and wonderful things going for it. And it's I think 40% racialized minorities within Brixton. It's an absolutely wonderful place, 60,000 people, 40%. So why aren't many people like me involved with the transition town Brixton? And this is what I really wanted to find out as well. And then the fourth and final question I asked, and sorry, the numbering is a bit wrong on my slides there. What can Transition Town Brixton learn from other movements, past and present, in order to address this issue of diversity deficiency syndrome? Okay, so with environmentalism, the charge often leveled at us as environmentalists or as environmental groups is elitism, and elitism. I'm going to rush through this a bit because of time, but elitism comes, that charge is framed in three different ways. Compositional elitism, which suggests that environmentalists often come from privileged socioeconomic backgrounds, and so they have the time, space, and wherewithal to engage in environmental matters. And people who are socioeconomically deprived or otherwise don't have that time and space to engage in environmental matters. Then there's ideological elitism, which suggests that the aims for environmental reforms are a subterfuge for distributing benefits to environmentalists and or costs to others. And in that frame, in that particular sentence, you can understand why perhaps, or from my research and some of my findings from Black and brown people, was that, look, the West has developed, has exploited the earth and developed, and now you don't want underdeveloped countries to exploit their resources and develop. You want to keep them in perpetuity, in a perpetual state of underdevelopment. And then the third category of elitism, which is charged with environmental movements, is impact elitism, which suggests that the environmental reforms, intentionally or otherwise, will in fact have regressive social impacts. So those that have benefited will be okay, but those that haven't benefited, those so to speak, on the bottom ranks of the ladder would not so much benefit. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs was a guide in trying to assess whether this was true or not. What I found with my research in Brixton was that class and issues of elitism were not really the problem, in terms of Transition Town Brixton being inclusive or attracting people like myself to the group. It turned out race was a much bigger factor. So then I decided to go a bit deeper into it. Now, heading for extinction is of course how Extinction Rebellion first sort of burst onto the scene and framed its call to action, so to speak. And just for clarity of purpose, I am also part of Extinction Rebellion in Lambeth, and I'm always with Extinction Rebellion as well as Transition Brixton. And heading for extinction, really what it's saying is we're destroying the earth, absolutely, and that is so true. We are destroying the earth. We are extracting too much from the earth. We are polluting too much. We are killing biodiversity, all around the earth. But then what's heading for extinction really is saying is all lives matter, and of course, indeed, all lives do matter. All lives do matter. The climate and ecological emergency, the crisis that we face, is going to affect all of us. Yeah, but all lives matter really is a truism and a promise that is yet to be, and yet it must be. Why do I say that? All lives matter is a truism and a promise that is yet to be and yet must be. And this is something that's some people within this audience might find a bit challenging. Well, my research, part of my findings from speaking to a lot of Black and brown people like myself, was that, look, we've been facing extinction for a long time. We've been facing so many issues for a long time. Environmental movement is saying, 10 years time, we're going to be facing that. Look, every single day we face psychic death. We face problems of institutional racism. We face so many issues. We have bigger fish to fry, and that is to navigate every single day and come out alive at the end of every single day than to necessarily engage in environmental activism. When I dug a bit deeper into how environmentalists or environmentally minded most people were, Black and brown people were, or people within Brixton, and this is out of an interview or surveys of 432 people, I actually found that 52% of Black and brown people were very environmentally aware, and 48% of white people were environmentally aware. So a lot of Black and brown people were already practicing in many ways, environmentalism. So this brings us to the problem, which is, of course, what we're here to kind of discuss. An orientation towards collective action on behalf of one's group is a common feature in multicultural societies, and that is very true. You know, that is that very much speaks to this notion of deep diversity, and also us and them, and this relates to the functions of the amygdala and our primal functions of security, of defense, of, you know, and so on, looking after each other. We tend to form clusters, and this is a problem. Now, sorry, the picture just there is, I think, beginning of June last year, when we went to, you know, it was pandemic, you know, full grip, but we were in Trafalgar Square protesting that Black Lives Matter, because for a lot of people that were protesting there, you know, yes, the pandemic was a huge issue, but every single day they were facing an epidemic of some sort or the other. And of course, the news media amplifies that very much. So that brings us, us to ask some questions, and these are two brilliant questions, I think, that Arci and David posed in the invitation. And that is, how do we bridge these gaps that's, you know, this massive othering that is going on within societies? How do we bridge it? And how do we create fertile soil for our diverse individual and collective needs to be met whilst building a healthy and just transition? Because our transition to an environmentally sustainable world cannot be just focused on environmental sustainability. It must also be focused on justice, issues of justice, and this is very, very true. So let's just address a couple of definitions before we move along. First, let's look at diversity on its own. So diversity, when we talk about diversity in general, we talk about surface level diversity, which is what most people think about. Yeah, and surface level diversity is the genetic of visible physical differences of a person, you know, so of course race, gender, age, you know, and so on and so forth come into that category. And then there is deep level diversity, which I thought I should point out here, which is different from deep diversity. And deep level diversity is about the non-observable traits that can be concealed or revealed, you know, by a person, you know, such as beliefs, attitudes, and religion, and so on and so forth. So people can hide, you know, those factors about themselves. Then we have deep diversity, and deep diversity, you know, I took Shad Manji's sort of framing of it, or conceptualization of it for this, because I thought this was very helpful. Deep diversity is the opportunity to go beyond polarization to integration of interests and values. It has three pillars: inclusion, transparency, and radical honesty and mentorship. Okay, so what Eshad Manji is saying is we need to go beyond. We need to go beyond these differences. We need to transcend those differences in order to function, you know, to move forward. Okay. But of course, Black Lives Matter was telling us that all lives cannot matter until Black Lives Matter, and that's kind of quite true. I mean, I talked about it in a couple of slides ago, and to understand why, and this is a quote from a piece I wrote for Extinction Rebellion not long ago, to understand why all lives cannot matter until Black Lives Matter, matter too, is to understand, as per Martin Luther King, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Now, that perspective positions justice as the entry point in trying to understand and calibrate how the fight for environmental sustainability and struggles against race-based or socioeconomic inequality-based may be interpreted and brought together, coalesced to form a bigger movement. In other words, to subscribe to and you know, and apply that mantra from Martin Luther King across space and time as the main point of departure and the analysis of a relationship, of any relationship between justice and the environment, is to contend that climate justice is linked to racial justice, is linked to social justice, is linked to intergenerational justice. Yeah. Now, social justice, racial justice, these are intragenerational justice. These are justice issues that are calling for our attention right now. Okay. what deep diversity then was saying was to transcend these things. On the right there, you have a screenshot of a tweet I put out, I think it was sometime last year, and the response to it, I think, was very interesting. So I put out this tweet saying, in a crisis of belonging and othering, we must move beyond self-righteous trenches. And then I quoted Dr. Wall there, saying permaculture design principles suggest that the more diversity we integrate, the more creative, diverse, and generative our solutions will be. And of course, someone responded immediately to me saying that, oh, no. Dude, there really is no crisis. But the more you say there is, the more you attract one for yourself. Think about it. Oh, well, that's me educated then, isn't it? Because all the crisis going on around the world, or the Palestinian issues, or the inequalities happening all around the world. I just imagine then if we just transcend those crises, people not having water to drink, people not having food, and so on and so forth. If we transcend those crises, then there is nothing to see here, really. And I thought, wow. Okay. So.
Thank you, Nick. I give you 1 minute more to wrap up.
Okay, sure. I can go on and on and on. So I did some quick research, and I found this article by Pelletier, which I thought was very interesting, which kind of speaks to the deep diversity sort of angle. And I thought, no, I wanted to challenge that a bit, because if you cannot tell people to put aside the issues that really affect their everyday living, their everyday life outcomes and experiences, in order to just move on so we can solve this bigger problem. People are facing these issues each and every single day. I shall stop there. Very, very quickly, there is an event happening which is about Sweden, and it's about the Sami people. I've got the link here, and I'll share it in the chat afterwards. And Arci invited us to just share some books or some writings that we thought would be helpful. So I just chose these three, which I hope, which I think everyone should read. They're wonderful books, and they speak exactly to this issue that we're talking about. That's me done.
Thank you so much for this, Nick. And I feel we should have given you an hour at least.
Oh, it wouldn't have been enough.
These are so really, really important topics that you're bringing forward, and we're just getting a small taste of it. For sure, we will send everything that you're sharing here, the books and the links, for everyone that has registered to this event through an email in the coming following days. And since we didn't get any questions in the chat, we decided to just let you flow. And I think that was for the best, because yeah, as I said, we should have given you an hour at least. But now we will go into breakout rooms, and we will send you, or Abdul will send you everyone to a breakout room in groups of 4. And the question that we will send to you to discuss is, how can we integrate deep diversity into our movements? How can we integrate deep diversity more into our movements? And since time is running, we will give you around 8 minutes for discussion. And Nick, you will be staying here for the whole evening, so you can be in the chat also if somebody wants to connect with you. And
yes, and I think I'm happy to go into a breakout room as well if you want. Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be lovely. So Abdul, are we ready?
It's launched.
It's launched. Oh, perfect. So, and we are still live on Facebook, David.
Yes. Yeah, and you're spotlighted and I'm not. I don't know if Abdul, or is it just my...
But now you're spotlighted on mine.
Okay. Aha, well, it's on speaker view then. Nobody's spotlighted. Yeah. Okay, I don't know what's going on anymore. So Facebook. So what did we hear? We heard from Robert Wanalo, the framing of complexity of life, and now Nick Anim. Green but mostly white. Why? And he's talking about deep diversity and how we can integrate that into our movement. So if you're on Facebook, you could we're happy to take questions or comments or whatever from Facebook. So right there, we've got people there. It might not be Arci and I that see those comments straight away, but we can keep that channel alive as well. And of course, Arci, your beautiful introduction. What inspired you? What were you feeling when you wrote that?
Yeah, well, I really wanted to I have this tendency of feeling the pain, and this past 6 months or so, I have really felt the pain of polarization, and really on getting under my skin. And it has been a different kind of pain from the pain of seeing what we're doing to the natural world, what we are with the systems that we're under that are destroying the living whole as we know it. And my go-to place when I feel this pain is beauty. Because sometimes I can get like nihilistic about things. So what's the purpose? You know, what's the meaning in it? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And then asking myself those questions, I always come back to the beauty of nature, the beauty of diversity, the beauty of friendship, of love, of everyone's unique stories of how they became to be the persons they are. And so I wanted to invite that, as I truly believe that that's the purpose of it. Giving space to the pain and giving space to the beauty, because they go together, and to honor those who have gone before us, that have, like, this year is 100 years since women are allowed to vote in Sweden, and all the women and all the men and non-binary people in that time as well worked for that. And I want to honor that. So that was kind of what I was thinking when writing. But David, what do you think? Like, how can, as we are the co-chairs of Transition Network Sweden, how can we integrate deep diversity more into the Transition Network?
Well, I think probably the first answer is I don't know. We're in times, you know, where everything is breaking down, peak everything. So it just have to I start everything with saying, well, I don't have the answers. I want to work to find the answers. And in this particular question, I mean, it's understanding and talking about deep diversity. What is that? Is that something that that the movement can accept? And then, if we can accept that as a movement, as something that we can work with, then we could go forward in perhaps accepting the diversity that is in the movement already. which on the other hand could be construed as perhaps a bit of a cop-out. That is to say that it's well, that could be construed, that could be understood as a non-answer, saying we are already diverse in that case, and in some respects we are already diverse in that case. But that's not to say that we're not going to always continue to invite in new ways. And once we have a diverse group at an event, then making sure that we include everybody in the happenings at that event. And there's always ways of improving both how we invite and how we include. But it's yeah. So it's talking to different people. It's finding out more about what diversity is to different people and just exploring the space, I think, really. What do you think? Same question to you.
Well, we have 1 minute left, and yeah. I no, but it's the same. Like, I don't have the answers, but I really truly believe that diversity, deep diversity, is the nature of us all, of life. And there is, of course, diversity between just being, you and me are diverse, even though we have certain similarities. But so there's diversity on many levels. And how can we invite more from different levels to join us, to bring wisdom from those kind of experiences and knowledge? Because that's diversity is resilience.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what Nick had. One of the last slides that he had was that permaculture from Daniel Christian Ward. Diversity builds life, and we are a pro-life movement. We are for life and life's many qualities. I know, I nearly said pro-life, but I didn't mean that.
Good name, though. So now people are joining back. I hope you had the time to share. I know the time is a bit short in these sessions. And it's really because we also wanted to really give space to these wonderful contributors we have tonight. So it's really a tight schedule. And so I am wondering, is Martin here? Yes, he is.
I am. Hi.
Hi. I will just shortly introduce you to the crowd and give you the stage. So Martin Winiecki is a peace activist, a writer, networker, and the leader for the Institute for Global Peacework in Tamera, Portugal, where he has spent his time since 2006. And in his latest article, he's writing about how spiritual people have been fooled by the far-right movement QAnon that rose to the international awareness with the storming of the Capitol. We are very delighted to have Martin with us tonight, sharing his insights and experience as a global networker of peace. Very warmly welcome, Martin. The stage is yours.
Thanks so much, Arci and David and Abdul, and for organizing this important conversation. And also thank you for Robert and Nick for your beautiful and really valuable contributions. Yeah, it's really great to be here with you. Yeah, so we had this conversation with David and Arci to prepare this talk, and we were sharing about the polarization that is happening in intentional communities and the transition town movement, And I think this is a reflection also of what is generally happening in many parts of society, especially since COVID has kind of dominated the world stage. And yeah, so some of the questions that were there were like, how can we walk together in these polarizing times without tearing each other apart? And so I will take that angle and actually start by looking a little bit into the polarization that is going on, because I think if we want to understand how do we actually counter the polarization, it is like appeasement is not necessarily the right strategy, but we have to ask ourselves, like, why is this happening in society, but also in our communities? And yeah, this is also I will share views that might also be like challenging or provocative or divisive to people, but I hope they will serve this conversation. And I have been particularly fascinated by the rise of QAnon, especially also seeing so many of my friends, people in other intentional communities, people in the New Age movement kind of fall for what I consider a very dangerous, but also intelligently engineered narrative operation to make a far-right movement and government seem as if it is an alternative to mainstream society. And I also want to say that while there are millions of people that have kind of identified with the kind of salvationist mission of QAnon, there are millions more who have in one way or the other internalized and also spread some of their narratives. So it's been like a really very powerful, yeah, mimetic operation, you can call it. And I think it's also somehow been a reckoning, for example, for the eco-village movement, when we observe what has happened, for example, in Germany with Anastasia communities, like promoting really like quite some like authoritarian ideologies, and the eco-village movement being like quite paralyzed and unable to come up with a unified stance. And yeah, those are admittedly complicated times. And I want to now put a thesis and kind of illustrate it a little bit, which also led me to writing this article, which was, rather than like, there is often this in like mainstream bourgeois society, like the way we often respond to friends or people we thought were somehow liberal, or one of us kind of convert into followers or even ideologues of far-right ideology. There's often this sense of like looking, who were the evil people who spread the propaganda, and we kind of get really sophisticated in our thinking of like, what were the social media strategies and how could it happen? And what I would propose as a counter thesis to this is actually to say the reason such ideologies can flourish in certain movements and subcultures is that these movements and subcultures have been harboring, hiding, and perhaps in some ways cultivating the beliefs and biases that are surfacing in more direct and overt ways through these ideological or narrative operations coming in. So so the question really is like, what does many people in alternative, spiritual, intentional community movements converting to QAnon followers, what does it tell us about our own communities? What does it tell us about the issues that we have perhaps avoided? And so if we don't want the forces of polarization to destroy our communities from within, I think we need to understand why people in our own ranks are so susceptible to certain ideologies. And so I want to name like 3 points that I have found. I know there are, we could talk about this forever. And I think there is a lot to really look at here. And so I also just want to make the disclaimer that for the lack of time, this will be really generalized, because also not every pattern that I will mention will apply to each group in the same way, but still those are trends that I have observed in the aforementioned movements. And one thing is a kind of what I would describe as a kind of political innocence, or also a lack of structural analysis. So something that I have observed is that, like, especially with QAnon, that like that actually what QAnon has done in a very intelligent way is to kind of hijack a political awakening that has been happening in many people. So people who have been kind of conditioned to believe that, like, to believe in the values of our civilization, suddenly have this awakening moment of realizing how much corruption, how much crime is going on underneath the surface. And suddenly there is this realization how deeply we've been fooled, how much we've been betrayed in a way by like the narratives that have that we have been internalized with to believe in the good of society. And suddenly there is this awakening where you know, there is this sense that there is a huge conspiracy going on. And so I have found that people who haven't spent a lot of time understanding the systemic dimension of how power is moving, of how wealth is organized, you know, it all seems like you think there must be, you know, there must be some dark room behind it all, where people are conspiring to make this whole crime happen. But actually, like, I think even what some of the things that QAnon is pointing out, it's not just lies, but it's actually crimes that are going on. And I'm not talking about the reptiles or Pizzagate or something. But like, you know, the fact that the governments are corrupt, that pedophilia, yes, it plays a role in high society, and that we need a great awakening. Like, those are all like fair points to be made. And still, like, there is this framing of it as a conspiracy, like by individuals who conspire together to do this. And there is this omission of the systemic nature of the way our economy and our societies are constructed to make that happen, where actually you don't need this whole concept of personal conspiracy. And so with this lack of structural analysis, people have been very susceptible to this conspiracy framework. And I think also during the pandemic, you have seen a mainstream that included also big parts of the traditional left that has become more and more intolerant to criticisms, for example, of the health measures that have been taken, and where false binaries have been offered in response to more and more people falling for such narratives, binaries of like health or freedom, or being a responsible citizen, or being a conspiracy theorist. So there has not been an engagement with this from the mainstream with people who have been feeling in this way, but just like casting them as crazies, as conspiracy people, which of course has increased the sense that the things that QAnon has been promoting must be right. And then of course racial bias plays a huge role when you look at the nature of some of the things that have been said. The whole anti-Semitic trope that you can find in the theory of how George Soros, for example, is steering all the social justice movements, or also this whole idea that Black Lives Matter, has been financed by billionaires. And there is really this like horrible, like anti-Black idea that actually, Black people couldn't achieve something like that unless like there was a white person behind it somehow engineering it all. So, and also I think there is a deep sense of insecurity and fragility, like in big parts of white populations around the world, where in the face of a changing world and in the face of the demands of marginalized people for justice, there is really a sense of like we are being threatened. And so there is this reassuring sense of like of such conspiracy theories, that are framing these phenomena in this way. And I don't have to repeat because Nick already said a lot of things around that. And another thing, and I think this is also linked to that lack of structural analysis, is the fact of like the demographics of who actually is in our movements. I think part of my invitation or my challenge would also be to say that like the demographics that we currently have in like intentional communities or in the ecological and transition movements that are predominantly, if not entirely, white and middle class in many cases, that those aren't incidental, but those are mirrors to the structural inequities that exist within our own communities, as well as mirrors to like the messages that we have internalized as white people in our socialization, and that because they have often been pushed to like a level of like unconscious layers in our own personalities, we are not conscious of how we are communicating them. Like it's often only apparent to people who don't belong to the majority groups, like of white middle class people like myself. And that really also ties into a deep question of like political relevance, because I believe that in many ways, like the alternatives that we can create, like there is this, like it's somehow, sorry, I will back up a little bit. Like there is this balance of, you know, I think in many ways the community movement, the transition movement is a response to like a political movement that has been fighting on the streets and demanding structural change. And then people have been saying, actually, let's create alternatives. And this is super important. That's why I'm engaged in it. And at the same time, if we take this so far to deny like the structural realities, the systemic realities that exist, we are actually also like we are missing the possibility of deepening and of also reviewing the political relevance of the alternatives that we create. Because in many ways, I think the alternatives that we create are only as deep and comprehensive as our analysis of the existing systems that we want to transform. And why I say it's a political innocence in our movements, it is somehow the inability or the unwillingness to see the communities, the movements we create, and that we also like to describe often in like the alternative utopian terms, to see those movements like on a systemic and social level. So like, you know, there is this often this sense of exceptionalism to say, you know, we are the good people because we have left society behind, and we have come into the movements because we have all this analysis about capitalism and patriarchy and all these things. And so we are creating these alternatives. And because we have left this mainstream society, you know, we can't be capitalist, racist, patriarchal. And in this way, people are actually falling for this very typical white pattern of always kind of externalizing, othering, making other people responsible for the traits of our own culture, which we don't want to see. And so it is exactly this denial, this willful ignorance that are allowing toxic trends, blind spots of white Western culture to run uninterrupted and often unconsciously and unintentionally dominate our communities. And so I think if we want to diversify our communities, you know, the question shouldn't be like, you know, how do we include other people? But the question is, why are we so excluding currently? Like, what is it? Why people of color, Black people cannot come into our communities or cannot stay? Like, what are the barriers that the makeup and the mental fields present in our community, what it creates, and I think there's also like, and this is also something that I observe in these these conversations or in these challenging debates that exist, that like it's often like a clash of two different definitions of racism, for example. Like there is this definition of mainstream society that says like, you know, to be a racist is to be someone who is intentionally bigoted. And so in that definition, I, as a good, willing white liberal, I'm of course never racist. And I fought on the streets against Nazis and so on and so forth. There are all these reasons. And there is the other view, which actually sees racism just like others, you know, like homophobia, sexism, patriarchy, ableism as systems which I, as a white person, am privileged by. And so there is no way for me to kind of to run away from my responsibility in co-creating and stabilizing that system in some ways. And so I would say like, yeah, we really have to, like, if we are serious in a way of creating alternatives to white Western culture, we have to face and own the shadow of this culture. And so I would just mention another aspect. I don't know how I'm doing in time, but that goes more onto the psycho-spiritual level of it, because yeah, I talked now on a political level, and it is important. But if we actually do this work on a deeper level, we will come into contact also with with layers of trauma, with layers that require healing. And I find also one reason why particularly many people of New Age backgrounds are so kind of susceptible to the QAnon narratives is like a widely spread, what I would call avoidance of the shadow in New Age circles. And like there is this often excessively one-sided focus on the pure spiritual plane of light and love. And that focus leads often to an equally excessive negation of negative emotion. So like fear, anger, grief also. And so as we don't have conversation with those shadow parts of ourselves and suppress them, because we create this self-image, the spiritual ego of like a pure light worker, this negativity is pushed to a layer where it takes on a life of its own. And so like I think there is a real importance for engaging with these parts of ourselves, for having processes for grief, for anger, for fear, for working on trauma. Because unless we do this work of transformation, we will always feel this urge to kind of relieve ourselves by blaming others for what we cannot somehow, what we cannot embrace in ourselves. And so I find that people who like, for example, have a very strong, inability to embrace anger will be more susceptible to binary theories of the world or myths of the world that divide the world into good and evil. And yeah, so.
Thank you, Martin. I will give you 1 minute to wrap.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, and what do I say as a finishing? And I also find that, like with New Age, and this is also, I think this is also one factor, is there's often a lack of discernment, or like if that leads to a fusion of contradictory worldviews, perhaps. So I find that like New Age is like this, in a way, this pick and mix restaurant, like where we can pick all kinds of different cultural elements and spiritual worldviews that we resonate with and fuse them together. And actually we have like also there, like when we look at QAnon, there is a very strong salvationist idea. And so this is also just a reflection of parts of Western culture that hasn't been processed with. And so, yeah, I would just say, I would really encourage people, groups, communities, movements to like engage in conversations around structural analysis also the question of like the shadows that we carry inside ourselves. I know there is often like even raising these questions can be felt as divisive or as like the threat of ideology. And still, I think I actually have the experience that the more we do this work, the more I as a white person can kind of own up my complicity in white supremacy, or I as a man can own up my complicity in patriarchy, the less polarizing those conversations will become, because I don't have this constant need of like blaming somebody else on the outside. And I think this is often what we do in these conversations. We're trying to hide from something within ourselves. And so if we can embrace this shadow, we can actually use these difficult issues to broaden our relevance, our political relevance, and thereby also create more diversity. So thank you for listening, and I hope it served.
Thank you so much, Martin. And I feel just the same as with Nick, that we should have given you another hour to speak on these topics. So there hasn't really been any questions in the chat, and we let you just go with the flow again, as we think that was very, very valuable. But I think you will stay around. There has somebody is asking for your articles, so you could maybe check in the chat, and people can write to you in the chat. And now, before we go into next breakout session, we will just invite Robert again to give us a short reflection on what he has been hearing. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you to Nick. Thank you to Martin. It just reminded me of the experience of being in the Warm Data Lab training, whereby getting into the details of complexity and systems, it was intriguing, it was confusing, it was beautiful, it was interesting, but then when you begin to ground those ideas or those ways of seeing and holding things and grounding them into the complex things that we are holding during this time, with all kinds of complex challenges, then it now becomes an invitation to cross the threshold of, I enjoy all of these things and these ideas, but now it's calling me into a place where I'm being invited to hold even the difficult things. And so, yeah, just feeling a sense of acknowledging that even within myself. And just nothing but gratitude to both of you for bringing that to light. And I guess the one thing I could say from our breakout was that, we just all had a sense of no answers and just a lot of questions, I guess. And so, yeah, that's how I feel at this time. And yeah.
Thank you so much. And now I will ask Abdul to put us in breakout rooms with 3 people this time. We will do a little bit shorter session with 7 minutes as time is running out. And we send the question, what is alive in you at the moment, after listening to both Nick and both Martin and Robert's reflections. So what is alive in you at the moment?
A lot.
So 7 minutes, 3 persons. And I think we're ready, Abdul? Yes.
Wow.
David.
Yeah.
What is alive in you at the moment?
Pardon? What's alive with me? It's just so rich. There's so much to take in all the time, and keeping an eye on other things. I feel like I need to see this again to really kind of digest it. I'm feeling very happy for the positive response in the chat, which people on Facebook can't see, but there's been a lot of sort of interest or appreciation for what's being said, and interest to learn more. And I think as long as we've got curiosity and interest to learn more, and appreciation for people standing up and saying what they think, that when we don't shoot them down, we listen and say, aha, that's what you think, okay. Obviously there's limits to that. You can't just accept anything without recourse sometimes. But I'm really liking the curiosity in the audience at the moment. So it feels like I don't know. I've still got my sort of host hat on. So that's just, yeah. You've got your host hat on. I haven't got. So I'm kind of happy with the way it's going, and I'm gonna be coming back and checking the recording again to really get all the details of all the nuances of what's being said. I'm also feeling like we should have had 3 hours and not 2 hours, but there we go. I can't hear you.
I'm muted. I was
muted.
Sorry. So yeah, what's alive in me? Well, a lot, really. I mean, like in the opening speech I gave, this event is so important for me and for you as well. As I know, because we have been working on this together for a few months actually.
Mm.
Yeah, I really like something what Nick did in the beginning to take a silent moment for all of those who are not as privileged as we are, that really are giving their lives, like literally, to defending the living whole, to defending their homes, defending biodiversity, their cultures. I think that's so important to keep in mind, that to be allied with that, with my actions and my speech, my thoughts. And that's a really tricky question, like what does that mean? So what does that mean to be ally? Like one thing is to tell people about these things, but I think transition movement is the movement that I found that really on the deep level tries to do that, like practically. And of course we have so much more to grow into, so much more to learn. But
Phoebe.
Hello, Phoebe.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hey. Am I in the right place?
You are.
Great.
We're everyone else is in breakout rooms, and we're just we're doing the breakout question live on Facebook.
Okay. So hey, you're Arci.
Hi. Nice to meet you. Yes,
nice to meet you. So I'm live right now. I'm just
straight into a live stream. Yeah.
Hello. Hi everyone.
Yeah, so it feels like a perfect opportunity just to out Arci completely as a total fangirl for you, Phoebe.
Oh wow, I'm so honoured. That's cool.
I even started Immoral Imaginations.
Wow, you started Immoral. I've been looking for the right person. I can't start it because I'm just so moral. So I'm just so glad that I finally found.
It's me, it's me, it's me.
That's so great. Actually, my best friend, Neil, from the beginning of the project has been saying, Phoebe, he's Catalonian and very passionate. He's like, Phoebe, you know, you cannot have moral imagination without immoral imagination. I'm just like, he's got a point. He does have a point. And it's about, it's totally about that as well. Tell me more.
Well, I have a artist name called Sneaky Spice. I'm the sixth Spice girl. And so I'm Sneaky Spice. And I just love being sneaky. That's just who I am. So yeah, I got the chance to coach my friend how to call in sick in order to be able to party with me.
Really,
kind of thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Completely immoral.
It's subversive. It's like subversive. I almost said submersive and subversive imagination. I mean, it's the skills that the kids that had most fun at school had down. How to loop out of the default institution.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Because it's more a party than a protest march, isn't it?
Exactly. Actually, somebody told me a great quote recently, like, the way we're going to change the world is to throw a better party than the alternative.
Exactly. And now we are having our dear participants coming back.
Yeah. Gallery view is excellent, isn't it?
Oh.
See all these people coming back. It's wonderful.
Just switch my phone.
So over to you, David.
Over to me. Yeah, I was just looking at the timing because we're going backwards and forwards with the timing. But yeah, we're going in. We've now got Phoebe Tickell here with us. Welcome back from your breakout rooms. I hope you had a nice time. Take what's alive in you at the moment. Take the conversation with you and take it with you out into the world. Well, of course, with the rest of the evening first, but then take it with you out into the world. And we have Phoebe Tickell with us now, who's been in workshops back to back all day, and now is here with us, and we're honoured. And Phoebe Tickell is a scientist, a complexity thinker, facilitator, and a serial entrepreneur. She always brings her deep understanding of complex systems to the many different situations that she creates and is invited to. Tonight, Phoebe will be bringing part of one of her latest projects to us, Moral Imaginations. And I understand that 400 people, or approximately 400 people from deprived areas in the UK, have tried this powerful and inclusive collective imagining process and found that, well, I don't know exactly what they found, but what I've heard is that it's incredibly engaging and, as I said, including. And for some people, it's like being listened to for the first time. No one's asked these questions before. So Phoebe's out there asking questions, offering methods and possibilities for people to speak, those who haven't had a voice. And we are absolutely delighted to have Phoebe with us here tonight. And I think we'll be trying a little bit of moral imaginations. Is that correct, Phoebe?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I think so. I think that's apt. As long as everybody is willing to go and find their imagination garment, which is one of the core tools of moral imaginations, is that you, at the beginning, I have to give you just a couple minutes. I mean, you probably don't have it on you because it's not an everyday object. It's something you probably keep somewhere else or maybe tucked away for special occasions. It might be a hat or a scarf or a cloak or a funny item. But to start with, that's where we're going to start, is I want you to leave your computer and find yourself your imagination garment, which basically the brief of that is It's an item that helps you enter other realms. It's an item that helps you enter other realms, and you may end up looking quite silly, and that's absolutely fine. So I'll just give you like a minute or two to find that. Nice. Cool, so hopefully people are coming back. I can see hats, I can see rabbit ears, great. Oh, Nick, absolutely rocking it. I wouldn't have expected anything less. Nice. Robert, what's your, do you want to tell us a bit about what you've got there?
This is my nephew's quiet book with all kinds of activities and things. And so it's tucked away here in a big box with all of his things. So I find myself looking at this from time to time, lost in it. So that's it.
Nice, thank you. Would anyone else like to present what is this item? What is this piece of clothing, or what do you have? Anahi, I see you gesturing.
I have here some oils from native forest from the south of Chile that I have always with me, and I share with you.
You can already start. You can almost smell it, I feel. Maybe one more.
Yeah, this is Maya from Holland. Hi. Well, I have two things. It's either my crystal or my needles, where I do my weaving with. That also brings me really nicely in my space, or in an imaginative state of prayer and reciting mantras, or just getting my thoughts on a row and getting some clarity and overview again.
Beautiful, thank you. So I just wanted to check, David, how much time do we have until we have to finish, just to plan?
Well, we're finishing the whole thing at 9, as in 27 minutes. Try and distinguish, but we've got a few other things planned apart from just you. Can you do what you want to do in 15 minutes?
I think so. I was going to just say maybe 2 minutes about what Moral Imaginations is, because
excellent.
I feel like that could be good, and then we'll just do a very short practice. And I'll just start by paying gratitude and honoring my teachers who came before me. I mean, they're still around, but they were born before me and they've taught me a lot. Firstly, Joanna Macy, who I was trained by in California about 6 years ago, and she has continued to be a huge influence on my life and to be a teacher who has taught me in rational ways and also beyond the rational in some other ways. And I'm just so grateful to have been alive at the same time as her. And the other person is Nora Bateson, who I think is familiar among many people here. And Moral Imaginations, really one of the kind of bodies of work it really builds on, and that is present in it is warm data, and it's about this rigor of feeling, and some of the language that you'll hear, and sometimes some of even the phrases that I use are Nora's language and phrases, because she's had such a huge influence on me. So I just wanted to start with those two pieces. Moral Imaginations is my offering to the world in this time. It's probably the most important project that I've ever created. So it's been quite a vulnerable journey of bringing it into the world and sharing it and standing in the, just standing in it, because sometimes it feels a little bit like quite edgy work to do in a world that values the linear, the rational, the measurable, to be standing and offering this work that is very much based around the feeling realm, and around the realm of things that don't make total sense, and verge more into a realm of intuition and feeling and sensing, which I think is very relevant to this topic of sense making. And I was recently in a webinar with somebody I really respect and like a lot, and we were talking about sense making and complexity. And the thing that was really missing for me is, like, for sense making, we also need to be in the feeling place. Like, we need to make sense of things with our feelings, with embodied intuition, with the full set of senses, with all the bacteria that are in your body, 9/10 bacteria. Like, how are we going to make sense of the world if we're just in this very small place between our eyes? We need to be opening those senses and ways of learning and changing and being and feeling. And so just before this session, I managed to get out for a short walk, just because I wanted to kind of rewild my ecology before doing moral imaginations after like 6 hours of Zoom. And I was just thinking about this phrase, I think Robert might have brought it in earlier, of the ecology of communication. Is that right, Robert? I think you mentioned that, David. And if we have any, well, Robert, were you gonna come in?
No, I didn't, but it would be nice if, you spoke to it.
Great. So, ecology of communication. There are so many ways, it's the same topic, there are so many ways of sensing, communicating, that are beyond just the linear, the use of words, the rational, and actually it's such a tiny part. I think there's, some sort of percentage is something like 80% of communication is non-verbal. Well, I think it's the same in terms of, like, 80% of the way the world works is in the bit that is not on the paper. It's not the words, it's not the rational, linear, causal part. And so we're trying to develop these practices that play with the collective imagination and develop these practices that, in my wildest dreams, in 10, 15 years, or maybe sooner, non-linear time, will become part of decision-making, in as Joanna Macy talks about, in the halls of power. So this kind of Shambhala warrior prophecy that Joanna Macy speaks about, that we must go into the halls of power, and bring these tools and ways of being and feeling. Anyway, I could just talk. I don't have a script, which is dangerous because it means that I could just talk for a really long time. I think I've covered enough to start with, but just to say, Moral Imaginations is a project, it's a collective, it's a group of people who we're at the edge of innovating collective imagination practice, and that is embodied. So that's how it feels quite different to what I've experienced in other parts of, like, beautiful offerings, but maybe slightly different. And yes, it's about collective imagining, it's about building embodied practice, and it's in the realm of feeling and emotion. And the last thing I'll just say is that moral imagination for me is a name that kind of captures the need to, you've got the moral is both quite head-based and also heart-based, and imagination too is head-based and heart-based, and somehow they feel like polarities to each other, and we need to bring also the polarity of what is really serious, like catastrophic climate change, racism, sexism, massive inequality. These are not light or funny topics, but I think they're so heavy, and we get so trapped into places of tightness and trauma, that if we can create space to just, like, feel and play and explore in a way that gets beyond our differences and beyond the places that are painful, we can also kind of start to breathe life into those places. So it's about serious play, because we deal with topics that are very serious, but we take this approach of play to them. Okay, any questions? Are you feeling me? Does that make sense? Am I among people who yeah, are in this world and get this stuff?
There's a lot of applause for Joanna Macy and basically everything you're saying. I think people look as if they're delighted to listen to you, Phoebe.
Good, shared delight. So that's good for a Wednesday evening. Nice. Well, it's great to hear that there are fans of Joanna Macy, because we're going to do a practice actually from the work that reconnects, and because it's actually one of the simplest and shortest, which is what was needed on the menu tonight. So this is an inquiries from the future, and so we've got until we've got 10 minutes from now. Okay. So we're going to do a little bit of a journey, a small 10-minute journey, but obviously because time is non-linear, I won't say anything, I won't say anything more. Obviously it's 10 minutes in linear time, but we don't know how much time we spend when we exit non-linear time. So for that, you will need to put on your imagination garment, and if you're not already wearing it. And I would like you, if you feel comfortable, to lower your eyes or to close your eyes. And if you're feeling delight, just relax into that place of delight, and take a deep breath. Maybe take 2 more deep breaths. And just take the opportunity to become present to the sensation of aliveness in your body. And do a very brief scan of everywhere from your eyes and the aliveness you feel in your eyes. And your face, your mouth. Maybe relax your jaw if you've been holding tension there. And relax your tongue. And then maybe allow a small smile if it feels right. And relaxing your shoulders. Presencing your sitting bones, where your sitting bones touch the chair, just really grounding into that place. And you can take a moment to sense into your belly, where you might be breathing into. And when you're ready to just reopen your eyes and hopefully have just shifted a little bit more into presence and into realms beyond your body. And for this practice, we are going to need to make 2 assumptions. We're going to do this very speedy imagination practice, and it will take 2 assumptions. One of them is that there are human beings alive on Earth in 200 years from now. And I know that can be hard for people to buy into, because the present day feels so uncertain what's going to happen and what is to come of human beings on Earth. And the second assumption we have is that these human beings 200 years from now have a cultural memory of this time, this present time that we're all alive in together right now. So whether that's through kind of storytelling or transmitting knowledge through universities or some other way, somehow that knowledge has been passed down. And now a very special offering is we're going to travel across time. And we're going to travel there by the power of our intention and our moral imagination, because this moment calls upon us to use the power of our imagination to imagine moral futures. And to do that, we're going to use the sound ah. So I'm going to ask you to actually unmute your microphone, and we're going to all chant ah at the same time. And at the same time as that, it's very complicated because the time machine obviously is not a simple thing. You need to cover your camera with your finger like this. We can do a little practice. So 3, 2, 1. Some people have got to boost up the time machine engines. Okay, I think most of us have got it. Axel doesn't seem to, his time machine doesn't seem to work. Okay, and so we're going to, in a second, make the sound ah, and we're going to cover our cameras. And on the other side of that, we will have broken the sound time barrier. I think somebody needs to mute themselves before we start. And is this the person? No, it's a little bit up. Okay, so we're ready. We are ready. It was all a bit kind of slapdash because we were so short on time. I'm putting a document in the chat, which you're going to open when the moment is right. You don't need to open it now, so just leave it there. I know it's tempting, but don't touch it. Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So let's get ready. So let's cover the camera, and in 3, 2, 1, we're going to do an ah. 3, 2, 1. Amongst us now are 7th generation humans. And you can choose whoever it is on the screen who most represents that for you, because you have the power to do that. So somebody on this screen represents for you a human being who is alive 200 years from now. 7 generations. There's been children upon children upon children upon children upon children upon children upon children, and that being is in this time and space beyond time and space. And they say, ancestor, I greet you. Ancestors, I greet you. It's so wonderful to see all of your faces and to have traveled into the space beyond time. It's amazing because all my life, I've heard from my teachers, my grandparents, my parents about this time in which all of you are living, this time of the great pandemic. And I hear from them that in this time, people believed such different things to what we believe now. I almost find it difficult to believe that all of you were living in that reality. But I know it makes complete sense. At the time, things were very different, but it's just so extraordinary to hear about the kinds of things that you were grappling with, and the kinds of troubles and challenges that were around when you were alive. They say that in your time there are a few people richer than the richest ancient kings, while billions of people had no shelter, no food, no clean water. And they also tell us that in your time, there were bombs being made that could blow up entire cities. They also say that you spent all of your time on online digital platforms, and that there was a lot of fighting at that time. We hear about this time, there's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of conflict. And we find it's so interesting because obviously it's thanks to the work that you all did and the work that your children did and your children's children did that we're here today. And so we're so grateful for that. But it is shocking to hear that in this time of great struggle, and I think climate change was kind of at a peak hysteria at that moment, that actually all of you were fighting each other in that time instead of dealing with such huge problems. I'm kind of curious how you do it, and how you manage to ignore those big problems. And anyway, I'll be quiet because I just want to hear actually from you. So what I want to ask you is what is it like to be alive in this time, and what are the challenges that you spend your time thinking about? And I'd like to take this back with me to the future, so I can share it with the people I work with and collaborate with. So I've made a Google Doc, which I've put in the chat, and I'm wondering if you could tell me, what is it like to be alive in this time, and what are the challenges that you are tackling? So we'll just take 2 very short minutes to journal in response to this future being. And then we will need to rapidly travel back, because I know that back in 2021, we need to close this webinar. Let's take 30 more seconds. I'm just sharing the screen. It's okay because you're all anonymously writing, so nobody knows who wrote what. Okay, and I know we could keep going for forever, but we have to travel back, and I have to find David Bennett to hand over, to hand back facilitation. David, we've just got to go. We've just got to jump in the time machine. One moment. So if you will join me in covering your cameras, I don't want to get stuck in this weird time beyond time, and make a back. We did it. We're good. We're here. Excellent. Yay! Well done, everybody. That was the fastest time travel I've ever experienced. Thank you for coming on that little journey. And yeah, we do basically 5 days of this kind of thing in a moral imagination lab. So hopefully that gave you a little taste. And David, I'm going to pass back to you. Obviously, there's a lot of beautiful things in this document. So yeah, maybe we find a way to share it sometime.
Yes, thank you, Phoebe. Fantastic way of meeting the ancestors there. Thank you very much. And I, for one, are extremely curious as to the rest of the moral imaginations process and setup. And I see a lot of people from the transition and alternative movement throughout Europe as well. So hopefully this could be perhaps the start to a wider thing. Who knows? We're on the journey together of collectively imagining what this could be.
That would be amazing. I'm in.
Wow. You heard it here, folks. Right. So what have we got left to do? There's Robert. We're going to invite Robert in, but before Robert starts speaking, I'm just going to say it looks like we're going to go over time. I understand we said we're going to finish at 9 o'clock Central European time, but we've just got a couple of things that we'd like to do, a few things we'd like to say. Well, one thing we'd like to do and some things we'd like to say. So if you can bear with us, then it would be fantastic. Hopefully we won't be more than 5, maybe 10 minutes past the hour. Obviously, if you've got things to do at home, of course you go and do that. Thank you very much for being here. Robert, what have you noticed? What are you noticing?
Well, it's like a lovely Indian dish, there's just a whole array of flavors there, so there's what the story did, what the conversations offered in the breakouts, what both presentations gave, and I just feel very playful after that experiment, and I think I'm just going to engage in a whole lot of unusually silly business for the next hour or so, just shaking off the fun. So I just have gratitude to you, Phoebe. Thank you both of you for inviting me. Much gratitude to you all. I think it matters, matters for something that we're here together today at this time. So I just have nothing but that to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Arci, do you want to do the thing?
The thing?
I
can do the thing.
Yeah.
So we will do a thing that I think some of you will recognize, especially Phoebe, and it's called milling. So I would like to ask all of you to switch, those of you who haven't switched on your cameras, please do, and put on a gallery view. You find it on the right hand, left and right corner, upper corner. So, and look around at the others you have shared this session with. Maybe browse around on the different pages with all those beautiful faces. And come to a stop. Lay your eyes on one person. Doesn't matter who you choose. This person doesn't know that you're looking at them. And I hope now that everyone is looking at one person. And this person in front of you has, like yourself, chosen to be on this event right now. There is a lot of other things this person could have chosen to do today, this night instead. But he, she, they chose to be here. And this person probably also, just like yourself, wants to be a catalyst for change. This person in front of you cares and wants us to grow stronger together. I invite you to take a breath and to take that in. Find a way to, without words, just in your heart, to give thanks to this other person for being here right now, giving time to this work. It can be with a smile. And I invite you again to look around and choose another person to lay your eyes on. And this is another person alive at this magnificent earth during the same time as you. And this person has so much to give and is such a gift to this time. What kind of gifts do you see in this person? You probably don't know them, but if you just play with it, what do you think are the gifts this person is here to share right now? And know that right now someone else might be looking at you, feeling into the gifts you are here to share. Once again, find a way to just for yourself thank this other person for what he, she, or they give to this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Arci. Thank you, everybody, for coming and bringing your gifts here tonight, or this morning, depending on where you are. Okay, 2 minutes over the hour. So obviously we need to say thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you to Robert for noticing and sharing that with us. Thank you to Nick for bringing your research, for doing your research, for spending the time. Thank you to Martin for those deep insights. Is Martin still here? Well, we thank him anyway. Thank you to Phoebe for the creative work you've done and offered here tonight. Thank you, Arci, for doing this with me.
Thank you.
Yeah. So,
being my best friend in this place.
Wow. What else are we going to do? Right, yeah, so this is something that we're offering from Sweden, from Transition Network Sweden. Obviously, most of our offerings are done in Swedish. This is a European issue that we're talking about today. So this is an open call to anybody here from Transition Network, the Hubs Group, ECOLISE, Gen Europe, any kind of local or national organization to reach out to us, reach out to others. You know, this can be the start of something. Let's not let this be a one-off. With that said, we in Sweden would be happy to join a group. We won't be leading exclusively the next steps. This is an open invitation to co-create together. However, whatever shape that takes, whenever that appears, it's going to be the right time and the right way. So feel invited to contribute. And while we're talking about feeling invited to contribute, we are offering our speakers, some of them don't in fact know this, we'll be giving them some financial compensation for being here today, and you know, we're going to take that from our account, irrespective of what donations we get here today. But if you'd like to give a donation in Sweden, you can swish to us. Actually, could you find the swish number? I don't have mine for a moment. If you're in Europe, then you could use that PayPal link. Obviously, there's absolutely no obligation. But if you feel that you would like to contribute financially as well, then there is a possibility to do that. Absolutely no obligation, obviously. I'm sure I've forgotten something. Actually, what should we do now? Should we start again? This was fun.
Yes, let's do it again. I will take the opportunity for those who are in Sweden and wants to contribute. I will be doing my immoral imaginations, being sneaky spies and all, and asking you to donate to our crowdfunding. That we are trying to crowdfund a film about the transition movement, and we need lots of money. So please take up your phone and swish a lot of money to us.
We do in fact need the swish number.
So, and you can find it in the link with the description about.
Yes.
Yeah. So
cool. Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, you know, it'd be fun and completely stupid to start again, but I mean, there's so much more that we could hear from everybody that's spoken. So hopefully we'll find ways of speaking more, if only just to call you up on WhatsApp or anything like that. I'm looking at you, Nick, and you, Phoebe. Although Phoebe and I have things in common anyway, so we'll be hanging out. Yeah, I think that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to share something, yeah, feel free to do it.
Yeah, we could do an open mic.
And thank you, Abdul, of course, for being our great tech master tonight. We can maybe close the Facebook Live now.
I was waiting for me to come to launch music. Thank you, Arci.
Abdul is best. Yeah, so if you've got any thoughts or questions